This is my solution to problem 2 of the LeetCode challenges called add two numbers. Before I begin, I'll read out the description. So you're given two non-empty linked lists representing two non-negative integers. The digits are stored in reverse order and each of their nodes contain a single digit. Add the two numbers and return the sum as a linked list. You may assume the two numbers do not contain any leading zero, except the number 0 itself. Over here at the top, we've got a method called, or a class called listNode, and the init method, which is provided by LeetCode. This is so we know how they've defined the linked list. I've also defined another method called printList, which is just so I can use at the very end to print out the linked list in a nice way, just so I can make sure the function works. Now over here as well, what I've done is I've created two regular lists, converted them into linked lists using LeetCode's class listNode, so that I can pass them into the function that I've created over here, add two numbers, and then call the function and test if my function actually works. Now what we'll do is we'll fill out this shell over here, which I have for the function. So I've defined a function called add two numbers and given it two inputs, L1 and L2, which are our linked lists. Now, to begin, I'm going to initialize two regular lists, which are just empty at the very beginning. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through the entire linked list and append every single element to the initialized empty list that we have up here. So what I'll do is I'll create a variable called temp and make that equal the linked list. And while this linked list is non-empty, so that's what this line here means, I'm going to append to L1 the value of temp, which is just temp.val. And then I'm going to move temp to the next node in the linked list, which is what I have over here. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for L2. So I'll copy and paste this over here and make this L2 and this here L2. Now what we have is we have two regular lists, which are a bit easier to work with. Now what I can do is I can figure out what the length of this list is, which will help me in the future. So I have that there. And I also want to figure out the length of L2, so I do the same thing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to invert this list. So I'm going to create two empty lists. And I know that inverting this list or reversing this list, there is a function to do that. But this was my first attempt, and I do want to just document my first attempt, just so I can in the future look back on the video and see how I've improved. But I do use the reverse function a bit later. I'll show you where I use it. But what I instead did was I looped through from the end of the list back to the beginning. So the end of the list is len L1 minus 1. And I loop to the beginning, which is just -1, exclusive, so it stops at 0. And I decrease, which is I want to step by -1. So in this loop, I'm going to append to the inverted list the element in our regular list or non-inverted list, which is L1 list at the ith index. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for L2. So I'll copy and paste this. So I'll convert all the L1s to L2s. And now I have an inverted list. Now I'm going to convert these inverted lists just into regular integers. So I'm going to combine them all together. And the way I did that is I started off by converting every single element to a string. So the way I did that was I created a new list where I looped through every single element in our inverted list and converted them to strings. So now we have the same list, but they're all strings instead of integers. And the reason why I did that is because when you have a list of just strings, you can use the join operator or the join function with an empty string to just create a single string from all the elements. Then now that it's a string, I'm going to convert this all into an integer. So I'll use the integer function. And then I'll do the exact same thing for for L2. So I'll change these to L2. And now we've got two integers, so I can just add them together in a variable called sum. So sum inv L1 num plus, sorry, this should be inv non-capitalized. And then the same thing for inv L2 num. There we go. Yep. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this list, turn this into a list and reverse it. So firstly, I'll just turn it into a list. So I'll use a similar method to what I did above, except I'm converting everything from a string into I'm going to convert the sum into a string, which I have over here, and then convert every element in the string into an integer and turn it into a list. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the reverse function to reverse this list. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So I could have just used a reverse function instead of going through 2 for loops, which I've done up here. So these 6 lines, I could have just done it in 1 line, which is much easier. Now I'm going to convert this reverse list into a linked list. So I'm going to initialize 2 variables, cur and dummy. Cur just stands for current. So cur and dummy will equal just the dummy node for now, which I will create a node with the value 0, and it's pointing at nothing right now. So what I want to now do is I want to loop through every single element in the list we've created above. So for node val in reverse sum list. Now what's going to happen is the next node in cur is just going to equal a list node. So I'll initialize another node using the value from the for loop, which is node val. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make cur equal to cur.next, just so that we can step through the linked list rather than continuously changing that first element or the first node. So cur is equal to cur.next, and this will create our entire linked list. Now to finish up, all we have to do is we have to create a final linked list, which I could, I guess, use dummy, but I'll use something, I'll initialize a new linked list, which I'll call sumll. And I can't just use dummy on its own. I have to iterate to the next node in the list, because dummy starts at that first node, which we initialized to be 0. And this isn't part of the final answer. This was just so I can initialize a linked list and start adding on more values to the list. So I want to skip the 0 and go straight to the answer, which is dummy.next, because it's pointing to the first value in the answer. And then what I want to do as well is I want to print this out. So I'll use a method I created above, which is the print list method, just so I can see it in action, see if it does work. And then the LeetCode challenge wanted us to return the linked list. So I'm going to return the linked list over here. And then I'm going to call the function with L1 and L2 over here, just to test it out and see if this all does work. So what I'll do is I'll change these values to 2, 4, 3, and 5, 6, 4. So these are this is the example given by LeetCode, and the example given by LeetCode, when we add these two together, so we're not adding 243 and 564, we're adding the reverse, 342 and 465. When we add those together, that gives us 807. So we're not exactly returning 807 either, we're also returning the reverse, which is 708. So if I run this, we should see that the answer gives us 708, exactly as we expect. What I'm also going to test is I'm going to test 2 and 4 and 5 and 6, which is 42 plus 65. 42 plus 65 is 107. Reversing that is 701. So if I run this as well, we should get 701, which is exactly what we get. I'll test one final thing just to make sure it works with some of the base cases. So just 0 and 0. If I run this, we should just get 0, which is exactly what we expect, because adding these two together is just 0. And a linked list with just one element of 0 is 0, exactly as we have over here. Now, before I do wrap up, I do want to make a final comment. This is definitely not the most efficient solution. LeetCode provides a much better solution, which is done in about 10 lines, maybe a little bit longer. And it doesn't convert the linked lists to regular lists. It uses the linked lists and then creates another linked list while looping through both of the lists, which is much more efficient than mine. But this is my solution. Hopefully in the future I can revisit this question and try to fix it up. But for now, this is what I was able to provide for problem 2 of the LeetCode challenges.